Hello and welcome to this video on the bizarre idea that transfusing the blood of young people will make you healthier. As vampiric as it sounds, the concept of injecting the blood of a young person can be relevant in certain cases. Unfortunately, the idea has been co-opted by the pseudoscience and woo peddlers. So where is the line between hype and fact? Let's start with a brief description of how an emergency transfusion occurs. It begins with a donor who is nearly always a universal donor, otherwise known as someone who is type O negative. This means they have no surface antigens on their red blood cells. This is the negative aspect. The O aspect describes those who have neither the A nor B antigens on the cell surface. This is a donor whose blood has no major immune signaling features, the results of which are less trouble when a transfusion occurs. The transfused blood is going to be whole blood, red cells, or plasma. The choice depends on need. In an emergency, it is whole blood, which has red cells and platelets for oxygen and filling the wound. There is a range of other material present, including growth factors, cell signals, and immune cells to name some. Plasma is the blood without the red cells. Finally, there is just a red cell transfusion, such as an anemic patient would receive. Donor blood is typed and separated into the four major blood groups: AB, A, B, and O. The last being in most demand. If the blood were transfused and there was a surface antigen, the recipient's body would attack the red cells and destroy them, if the donor was not of the same blood group. This would lead to major immune response across the body, due to the scale of the response to the transfusion. Type O negative blood does not have this effect on the same scale, as there is no antigen to cause an immune response. If you present to hospital and your blood type is unknown, they will take a blood sample and then begin transfusing units of type O negative. This will put red cells back into circulation and keep you oxygenated. They will continue to do so until a more suitable donor is identified. There are contradictions to transfusions, pregnancy being one. Some developing fetuses may have a different blood type than the mother. If there are transfusions before or during pregnancy, this may lead to something called hemolytic disease of the newborn. This leads to antibodies to the fetus being made, and this may be lethal. Long-term transfusions are also a problem if they are not tailored through extra layers of vetting. Transfusions can create a similar autoimmune problem to that which attacks a fetus, with the recipient's red blood cells. Now you know what is done for an emergency transfusion, you may see some of the risks involved with this idea. You would be right to expect there are problems associated with transfusions in the long term. These are problems that have been known since World War I. The idea to use blood in this way required a unique catalyst. Historically, blood transfusions have occurred between healthy donors who were generally young. This was given to either the unhealthy, the elderly, or the injured. These people generally recovered to a state of good health as a result. This was due to care, superior nutrition, and respite. It did create a false impression of health. Research into why they got better entered the Fey realm for a while researchers tried to wrestle with the idea that young blood held miraculous properties that could either kill or cure instantly. Eventually, the underlying cause was identified: better care, better nutrition, and rest, coupled with the appropriate transfusion. There was still a lingering doubt about what benefit transfusions may hold. In recent history, this benefit from young blood was investigated with mice. The landmark study occurred in the early 2000s. It was a study which stitched together the circulatory system of multiple mice, some young and some old. They shared their blood supply. This grisly experiment appeared to rejuvenate the older mice. Their muscle and liver cells were able to regenerate, as well as those in the younger counterparts. While the old mice showed benefit from the transfusion of young mouse blood, the opposite is also true. In 2017, the National Institute of Aging committed nearly $2.5 million in funding for scientists to research this. It somewhat led to studies that are related to it, similar studies which examined more advanced conditions common to the elderly, such as Alzheimer's and dementia. In 2017, Tony Weiss-Corey, a neurobiologist studying Alzheimer's at Stanford University, conducted a trial where he took plasma from young donors and transfused it into patients with dementia. The trial was not a success, but they did demonstrate some improvement in tests that assessed their daily living skills. This was attributed to a component in the blood that was responsible for improving health, and research has shown that the ratios of components that affect the overall health, turnover in cells and recovery, change as animals, including humans, age. Blood samples from older specimens carry more signs of damage to the system, particular cellular and tissue damage markers. By contrast, young blood samples contain fewer of these markers. The blood also contains significantly more compounds that can stimulate cell growth and tissue repair, essential characteristics for recovery and youth. Biologically, this makes sense. Blood is the first source of growth promoters, cell signals, and more that encourage healthy recovery from wounds. We know that the young heal better and faster than the elderly. Clearly, there is some plausible biological mechanism that exists within the blood and young people as a whole that is not purely cellular. As highlighted in a recent This Week's What Were They Thinking, some companies have jumped on the fad of injecting young blood and other material as yet untested, unapproved, and largely unverified procedures or treatments. In 2016, there was a company called Ambrosia, which launched the first human trial of young plasma transfusions. They charged patients $8,000 to participate. Anyone over 35 willing to pay could receive 2 liters of plasma donated by young adults. Ambrosia purchased these from blood banks. Unfortunately, they've been unable to demonstrate a particular effect, reliably or consistently. Their work may not be able to demonstrate an effect, but there is limited evidence from animal models. Aging is associated with elevated levels of particular markers in the blood. These include liver health markers like alanine transaminase and aspartate aminotransferase. Research using rodents found that young plasma could restore aging and impaired autophagy activity. This is particularly important for those with defective liver regeneration. At a cognitive level, administration of young plasma into aged mice can improve age-related cognitive impairment, but this was an animal study. When you compare that to investigations with a human, there is a gap that hasn't been bridged yet. Transfusing young people's blood is currently a questionable procedure. Without thorough vetting, the recipient of blood donations or plasma donations can enter a form of autoimmune disease or worse. The procedures are not able to demonstrate a long-term benefit, and any short-term results may be due to a simple increase in red cell count. These can cause an increased risk of blood clots and other cardiovascular diseases. In summary, vampirism will not stop the aging process. You may feel better, but it comes with a considered risk. Blood transfusions themselves are generally limited to particular medical procedures or surgical emergencies for that reason. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.